Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. Today's guest is one of the top leaders in our community. She is a wonderful person, a family woman, a mother, a grandmother, a wife, and best known as the principal of St. Joseph's School. I'm especially glad to get to know her better today because my own son is a first grader there. So with no further ado, I bring to you Danette Ragusa, the principal of St. Joseph. Principal Ragusa, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
We're so glad you're here. Why don't we begin with you just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, and I went to Catholic school my whole life. I am a graduate of Sacred Heart from Baton Rouge, and about 25 years ago, my husband and I and our two children moved to Ponchatoula. My husband became the technology director of the public school system here, and we moved to Ponchatoula and became a part of the community, and we've loved it ever since.
Very cool. So he's a tech guy, and it sounds like you moved here for his job. How does that conversation go when you grow up in a big city like Baton Rouge? You've been there forever, and then your husband comes to you and says, "I want to come to this. I want to move to this sleepy little town called Ponchatoula." What's that like?
It took a little convincing. It was a little bit like, it'll be nice for life to slow down for our children.
Right.
And so, anything that's good for your children, you're willing to jump in and do. But when we came here to look for houses and our house was on a dirt road, I have to tell you that I did pause for a minute.
A dirt road? Wow. Now, I think you were telling me off the air before we aired that you saw deer and whatnot out of your windows. Is that right?
That is true. When we first moved here, a friend called to see how it was going as we unpacked. And as I was talking to her, I said, "There's a deer walking around in my backyard. That has never happened before." So
you don't see much of that in Ponchatoula. I mean, in Baton Rouge. And what I'll say here is I'm not going to ask your address, because if I do, some of the good old boys around here might be in your backyard come hunting season. And we don't need any poachers, out there at the Ragusa house. Well, I'm so glad that y'all made it this way. I've heard nothing but great things about your husband. I know the technology is first class, in the Tangi system. And of course, I have a better angle at seeing your contribution to our community, because as I mentioned, my son's in his second year at SJS as a first grader. But long before we got there, as the Layrisson family, as parents, I have seen just countless friends' kids come through the school, and they've been singing your praises over the years. St. Joseph's School is a very big part of my life. My daddy went there. My brothers and I went there. My principal, Charlene Meisner, one of my heroes to this day, one of the greatest ladies I ever met. And I could go on and on about all the great teachers and faculties, and Mr. Orso, our custodian. They're just wonderful people. So you stepped into a really big role here in this small community. And we're going to get into that later. I'm going to ask you a ton about SJS, but I just want you to know, you probably already do, how important it is for me and so many others in the community to get to know you a little better, because that school is not only, literally physically at the center of town, it is very much at the center, of the heart of this town. But before I get into more comments here, into more questions, I want to show you that we can share some comments here. And speaking of St. Joe, I think I saw Mandy in your carpool line here the other day. Mandy Franks Braywick, who's been a guest on our show, has commented here. "Hey, Miss Ragusa, this is a phone call I don't want to get on any day." LOL. But hey, and she comments separately that they love SJS. So, Mandy, thank you for watching the show. I love you and your family, and I'm sure Mr. Ragusa appreciates you commenting here. To our other viewers and listeners, if you're watching us live here on Facebook, know that we have the ability to post your comments, as we've just done with Mandy, and I'll do my best. So if you've got a question for Mr. Ragusa about St. Joseph's School, or if you just want to say something nice like Mandy did, please leave a comment and I'll do my best to get it up here. So that being said, Mr. Ragusa, you mentioned that you were born and raised in Baton Rouge. Tell us what it was like over there, because I'm sure you had a very different experience growing up in a big city than the one your kids have had growing up, on a gravel road outside of Ponchatoula. Would you mind telling us about that?
Sure. It definitely was a city life in Baton Rouge. I didn't know there was anything different as I grew up. I do have a very close family, and all of my family lived in Baton Rouge as well. So that was nice. We were a very connected family. We had Sunday meals. My husband, as well, comes from a big Italian family, and family was very important to them as well. And there were lots of family events. So I have to say, in that regard, I see a lot of similarities in us moving to Ponchatoula, because community and family is so important here as well. So that was a pleasant surprise for us to begin to see people with our values and to become connected fairly quickly with the friends of our children and making connections to make friends ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can certainly relate to that Italian Sunday gravy, having married a Bruno from Independence. My Sicilian wife and her family, they cook some great stuff on Sunday at family dinners. So that's neat to hear y'all were doing that in the city too. You mentioned earlier you went to Catholic school, basically throughout your whole career as a student, as a child. How did that impact you, and how would it later contribute to your role as an educator?
Um, it's really interesting because honestly, my mother was an educator at Sacred Heart. And so it was
Cool.
definitely important in our family. And I appreciated the Catholic school and being able to be a part of the Catholic school, but not nearly as much as I did when I was a grown up and when I had children of my own. And I have to
Right.
say that even I did a lot of my time as an educator in the public school system before I came to St. Joseph. And until I came to St. Joseph and I saw the commitment of the families and the parents and the sacrifices that are made so that their children can be a part of that school, I had a whole new appreciation for my parents and the dedication that meant they put in for my sister and I to be a part of that type of a setting as well.
That's a great, and I hadn't thought about that. I guess that hasn't hit me yet as just an SJS dad. But how does it feel, that moment when you realize, oh, whoa, Catholic school is not free. Mom and dad were not Bill and Melinda Gates, with billions of dollars. This is a sacrifice I maybe didn't comprehend as a kid. How do you feel once you realize that as an adult? How does that hit you?
I was very humbled, actually. My father has multiple sclerosis, and so
Hmm.
he went on disability when I was very young. And to know that they still made that a priority, I remember after being at St. Joseph only a few years and realizing the sacrifices that came for our families to send their children there. I called my mother one afternoon and just said, I just have to say thank you. Like, I just didn't realize. It wasn't something that they ever made a big deal. It was just a way of life for us. And so it truly was very humbling for me.
That's really neat to hear, because as you mentioned it, it makes me think about my own family's experience. And my mother was raised very poor by a single mother who was a seamstress in Baton Rouge. And I can't imagine how tough it was for her, my mama, to send her kids. She had four children to Catholic school. I mean, that just had to be so tough. And there's so many stories like that here in our community and in Catholic schools throughout the country. So it's really neat that you're shining a light on that. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little more about your household. You mentioned siblings, your father. What was it like growing up in your house?
I think it was a pretty normal childhood. I know that, my father being home, he was the one that was home every day,
Hmm.
and he cooked a lot. But it was a very normal childhood with two sisters who were 4 years apart, didn't get along very well for a lot of our growing up years.
Right.
Although today we are very close, and our family has continued to be very close, even though we don't live very close to each other
Sure.
anymore. But in that regard, we never realized that we may not have had everything that other families had, because my parents made sure that our house was filled with love and lots of togetherness so that we never felt like we were missing out.
Yeah. It's funny how you mentioned uh, not getting along so well as kids, because that's our experience. My brother Bree and I, we would fist fight. It seemed like every day. I mean, we were at each other's throats, and my poor mother, especially, what we put her through, because it was, Lord knows, a decade or more. We were just going at it, and then as adults, he was the best man of my wedding. I was his campaign manager. It all worked out. I loved him to death, but boy, sometimes it can take a while. Um, so tell me about your transition. We talk about, growing up in Catholic schools. Obviously, you're an educator now. So tell us about that kind of transition from the Catholic school system into college, and kind of where you went from there in that next chapter of life.
Okay. So when I graduated from high school, as I said, my dad was ill and on disability. And unfortunately, there was not a counselor at my high school that asked, hey, what are your plans and how do you plan to pay for college? And so that really wasn't something that my parents were able to do for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I started at LSU and I took out student loans like a lot of people do, and started going to school, but had to work as well. And it was hard to juggle everything. So I actually left college and went into banking for a while.
Come on, that's exactly what my mom did. But at USL. That okay? Neat. Tell us about that. What was that like?
So I worked downtown in Baton Rouge, one of the banks, and kind of thought that was my direction.
Mm-hmm.
I met my husband, who I had known from a long time ago, when there was a CYO, which was a Catholic youth organization, that all the parishes had youth ministers and youth groups, and we'd all get together as a diocese. So he was in a different parish than me, but we met one another. And
And by parish, you mean Catholic parish,
I mean church
not
parish,
state
yes.
parish. Okay.
Yes, I mean church
So but
parish.
also he was a Baton Rouge person. So he.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So he grew up in the St. Thomas More schools in Baton Rouge,
Gotcha.
and then went to Catholic High, and so we met through those types of events.
Mm-hmm.
We were very young. We dated. He's 4 years older than me, so I cramped his style, and that didn't last very long. And we met again years later at a retreat, and and that's where our
was this
story.
A Catholic retreat or some other?
It is a Catholic retreat. Actually, it was the Catholic retreat that I ran for the diocese, and so he was working with the youth in his church parish of St. Thomas More, and he sent a group of children to the retreat. They went back and were talking about all the retreat leaders and mentioned my name. I kind of have a different name, so there aren't many Danettes. And so we reconnected in that way. And
very cool.
And so when we got married, then I went back and finished my degree and went into education, finished my degree, and started my career.
And did you start your career in the public school system or in the Catholic school system?
I did. I started my career in the public school system.
Okay.
And I retired from the public school system. And as I told people quite often when I first went to St. Joseph, that I retired and went to Catholic school heaven.
That's cute. Well, my wife works in the public school system. She's worked in Livingston for many years, and she's a social worker by trade who works as a school counselor. She's about to begin Monday at Ponchatoula Junior High. So I know that can be a great place to work, but it's got a lot of challenges, and in many ways it's different than the Catholic school system. What were some things you learned in the public school system that you feel like help you be a better principal today?
I definitely believe that my time in the public school system was an amazing growing experience for me. I hope that I taught students as much as they taught me, because I learned a lot about diversity and the value of each child and everyone being different. And you can't put a price on that, on having that experience. It really does impact how you service children when you realize that, and now to be able to take it to a new level of every child that I encounter, to be able to bring that back to them being a child of God and the gift that he has put in front of me, it has just widened my understanding of God's amazing ability to create individuals and to try to appreciate each person for what they have, because it's not always the same, and that's not how it's meant to be.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question that I hear about a lot from friends of faith that work in the school system. It can be a challenge because of the restrictions you have in not being able to proselytize, in a public school or how did you approach that? Because it sounds to me like you've had a strong Catholic faith at least most of your life, if not your entire life. And certainly by the time you were teaching, if you're leading church, retreats, then I'm sure that was the case. How did you make that work in a public school system where you couldn't bring a Bible to somebody or talk directly about your faith or God? But that's still such an important part of your life, and how much these kids need that. How did people approach that in the public school setting?
I think that the best way that you can approach that is to remember that your actions model how you feel and what you believe to be important.
Great
and
point.
So respecting each child and modeling the morals and the way that you feel everyone should be treated is the best way to show God every day to your students, whether you're in a Catholic school or a public school.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you started teaching public school in Baton Rouge. I know you ended up in Champ Cooper because you taught some of my friends out there. Tell me, if you would, what are the different schools that you served before you arrived at Ponchatoula High?
Yes,
I mean, excuse me, at St. Joseph School. My apologies.
That's okay. So I started my career teaching middle school because I graduated in December. And when you graduate in education in December, if you want a job, you have to take whatever's offered.
Oh, yikes.
Can't be very picky. So the first job that was offered to me was middle school, and I fell in love with it. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's a different population. They're at such an amazing time in their life, and there's so many things changing for them, and it was a great experience. So I taught at several different middle schools in Baton Rouge before we moved to Ponchatoula, and then I was lucky enough to teach at Champ Cooper, and from there I transitioned to DC Reeves in Ponchatoula as assistant principal, and then eventually principal at DC Reeves as well. My husband moved jobs and moved to Ascension Parish to be the technology director there. And I left to open a brand new school in Ascension Parish. I left DC Reeves to do that. Mm-hmm. You don't have an opportunity to do that very often, that a brand new school opens.
That sounds like an incredible challenge. What's that situation like?
It was truly from the ground up, and it was like building a huge house. I mean, from picking tile in the school to the colors, the paint, and being there on the construction site, being a part of that as it came up, and then helping to begin a new family at a school because Ascension Parish was growing quickly, so they changed the lines and they were pulling students from different schools. So it was really important to create a new sense of community and family and atmosphere. So it was an exciting thing to do, and I'm glad I had a chance to do that in my career. And I retired from there. And
so when your husband went to Ascension and you end up over there too, did y'all move over there and live, or did you commute from here?
We did not. We commuted. We actually considered moving to Ascension Parish. And when we put our house up on the market, we had a huge shift in our family, in that my daughter was diagnosed with cancer as a senior in high school.
Oh, wow.
And so we realized that was not in our picture. We needed to hunker down as a family, take care of one another, do what we had to do to help her to get well. And so that changed our path. and God led us in a different direction.
Wow. And what a blessing it's been for our community, because I'm sure that's why you are still around to be able to accept the mantle of leadership at St. Joseph. Wow, that I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been for you guys. So help me with the timeline here, if you will. When did you retire from the public school system over there, and when did you begin at SJS?
So I'm starting my 9th year at St. Joseph, which is really hard to
Okay.
believe. It's gone very quickly. But I retired in May and I started at St. Joseph that July 1st.
Okay, wow. So 9 years at St. Joseph, has it been pretty much what you expected? Nothing like it? What's the experience been like there?
I can't tell you at this point, 9 years in, if I even remember what my expectations were, but it was a new challenge. And I truly believe that we have to continue to challenge ourselves to learn and stay learners our whole life. And I definitely felt that God was pulling me in that direction. I was very passionate when I was starting my career in public school that all children need good educators, and I still believe that. We need great educators in public school, and we need great educators in private school. And so in going to St. Joseph, I just hoped that I would have something that would add value, that would help St. Joseph to continue to grow. And I have not been anything but amazed in my journey at St. Joseph, and just feel blessed every day.
That's so great to hear. So, what's a day in the life of a Catholic school principal like? I mean, because you start with pre-K and go up to 8th grade. So, by my count, by the math they taught me at St. Joe in the 80s and 90s, that's 10 class levels, and of course, they have multiple classes for each age. What's a day in the life like running that? I mean, can you give us a feel for how many students, how many teachers, staff? What do you do? I mean, I have no idea what that looks like.
It never looks the same. So there is
That's
no day in the life of, except that you don't make a to-do list because you never finish it. Because I consider myself to be a servant leader. So it is my job to do what I can so that the teachers can do what they need to do in the classroom, and those classrooms and that classroom space can be valued and kept sacred during the day for our students to learn and grow and be safe. So if I'm doing my job, then that's what's happening on our campus every day. And so that's my focus, is to be that servant leader for them to be successful.
And what do you ask of your teachers? Like when you say you have a new teacher starting this year, last week or whenever that would have started, what advice do you give to them? What's the focus, especially if you're talking about a young teacher that doesn't come to the school with tons of experience like you did, but rather somebody like when you started teaching, in their 20s, just getting going. What kind of advice do you give them?
One of the first things I do, we talk about the logistics of teaching and what they'll be doing and so forth, but I always ask what their expectations are about our school and our community and our population, because I don't want anyone to come to school thinking that we have this perfect little bubble and that, our children are perfect. They think they're coming to a private school and everything.
Right.
Because we're all human and it's a normal day and we make mistakes, grown-ups and students.
Of course.
And at the end of the day, one of the best things about St. Joseph is at the end of the day, we all love each other. It's a very, very tight family atmosphere and community. And so it's that family sense that allows you to have that unconditional love piece that says, okay, we're going to get up and do this again tomorrow and make this better and make sure we do this thing again because it was great.
Well, I see what you've described in that family atmosphere at the end of every day when I'm picking up my boy in the carpool line, because that's reality there, right? It's the end of the day. Those, your faculty must be so tired from watching these kids all day and educating them and doing everything. but they really do. They work well together. You can just see this kind of team atmosphere as they're getting us through there efficiently, safely, but fast too. I mean, it's kind of like watching a good sports team running plays, and you can always tell when you're watching, for example, a basketball team chemistry, from the stands. You can tell how well those guys are getting along on the court. And I would imagine a carpool line's kind of similar. And your guys, they really seem to be a cohesive group. Mandy Braywick's back with a good question here. She says, how much has our school grown in the last couple of years? Would you mind answering that?
No, not at all. We've grown a lot, actually. We are at 540 students this year.
Whoa.
And so, yes, we are definitely at capacity across the board. And we even have waiting lists this year, which are very difficult for us because I know in the business sense, it's a good problem to have, but in the family sense of things, it's hard for us because that means people that we couldn't accept in this school year. So we are definitely growing. And our families grow as well. And I do believe that it's very important that we serve an entire family. So we're not looking for you to just bring us the pick of your crop of your students of your children. I mean, we want the whole family to be there so that it is that family experience of alumni and traditions that I know you're aware of, and that bring back memories for you. And I think that's important that we can serve the whole family.
Well, for sure. You mentioned traditions and memories, and I have so many at St. Joe, from my arrival there in kindergarten to the nuns leaving in the second or third grade, to really my favorite ones happen on the baseball diamond and on the basketball courts. Now in the basketball, bear in mind, I'm watching from the bench with some of your other SJS parents. I actually got in trouble on this show before for mentioning which friends were next to me on the bench, so I won't call anybody out. But I'll say I know you have at least one SJS dad in that group, if not a few. But your current boys basketball coach, Ben Perrin, was the best player on our team, and we won the championship in '91 under a great coach, Mutt Burner. And these are memories that last a lifetime. And our little group still gets together once a year in December to camp out behind Brandon Perrin's mom's house. And you can bet we're talking about specific games at SJS and, different years. So it's, I think, reassuring for those of us that know you came from outside our community to know that that's important to you and that you foster that. Even though you didn't grow up at our St. Joe, you seem to really get that. And I admire that.
Well, and I'll just say we work really hard, and I feel like over the last 5 to 6 years, we've tried really hard to give a great variety of experiences to our students because obviously not everyone's an athlete.
Right.
And so it's really,
I know that. I've been there.
It's really important in the age range that we have that we try to help our students to find the thing that makes them feel successful, that they feel good about themselves for. So we really have a lot of opportunities. And I just want to make it clear, I'm not taking credit for all of these things because these things happen because parents asked for them, or parents said, or teachers said, hey, what about this club? And I'd be willing to sponsor this. So I get to be the person that maybe helps to put it all together, but it's not me. And I know that. And I just get to watch the rewards of it. We have so many sports that we offer, and we have lots of clubs as well.
Well, I appreciate your humility and not taking all the credit, but I do see a stark difference in the offerings that we had versus what the kids now have. For example, my boy just signed up for cross country. We didn't have that when I was a kid. Would you mind telling our viewers about the different sports programs, clubs, and other extracurricular opportunities at St. Joseph?
Sure. We start in first grade with cross country, and that goes all the way to 8th grade. We have, I'm sure I'm going to leave some out, so I'll apologize now for any that I forget. But we play, we have flag
If anybody wants to put in the comments anything we leave out, feel free to mention that. But
they'll fill in. We have flag football, we have volleyball teams. We have basketball, that's girls basketball and boys basketball, and that starts in 3rd grade. 3rd and 4th grade, we have fundamental and foundational leagues for basketball to kind of get those skills going. And then 5th through 8th grade, we're competitive in a North Shore League. We have baseball, softball, track and field. We have a drama club that puts on a play every year. We have a beta club that's very involved in all of the district and state competitions. We have a 4-H club that's very active right now.
If my wife is still watching, she's smiling right now because she was on the state 4-H board. Brandy's really into that. That's a great club. I'm glad to hear y'all have that. Wow, keep going. These are so many. This is amazing.
I think I left out soccer. We have a dance team. We have a cheerleading team. We have a choir.
Wow.
Like I said, I'm sure.
And I think you just had a pep rally, if my intel is right, because my boy came home talking about how much he loved watching the dancers and cheerleaders at the pep rally. That was new to him as a first grader, so that's cool.
Yes, because that was one of those things we were able to get back to.
Right.
It's been several years since we've been able to start our school year that way. And so we had a pep rally the first Friday, and we had a dance for our 6th through 8th graders, both of which we have not been able to have for the last couple of years. So the beginning of this year has been an exciting experience for us, and just a great feeling of getting back to who we are and the things that we have grown to love and truly missed. As much time and effort as it takes to do some of those events, we were all happy to get back to those and be talking about that at the beginning of the year. I have to say that and give a shout out to my teachers and staff, because they worked so hard this summer, and everyone, you could feel the excitement of coming back to a year where we were not going to be saying no, 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 but we were going to be saying, let's not forget that we do this. A lot of prayer went into this summer as we prayed for our families. We actually had a rosary in July where we walked around the campus to bless our campus and pray for our families. We had a faculty and staff retreat before school started. They gave us another opportunity to be together and pray. So I feel very, very rooted in the Spirit, and that that is taking us into this exciting new year that we have. Our theme this year is back to our future, because we're trying to get back to who we were and how we did things several years ago, with the end goal being that our purpose is always for one another and for our students to help each other to get to heaven.
Yeah. Well, tell us about that. Like, you mentioned the higher purpose in education of helping students get to heaven. And obviously that's so critically important. How do you layer that into the education process? So, I mean, obviously my son came home, and right here in the next room this afternoon, we're doing math, we're doing reading, typically. But on Wednesdays, you were doing religion. It's different. Can you tell us a little bit about how y'all approach the inclusion of religion and faith and scripture, into the educational process?
Sure. You're right. I mean, it certainly is in isolation that we have a religion subject, and there is a time of the day for that, but it's embedded in everything we do. And one thing we work really hard at is to talk about, how does that look? How do we layer that into every subject that we do? And making sure that we, as administrators, myself and my assistant principal, Shelley Ernst, that we help our teachers to understand and kind of give that permission, and to please layer that into every subject that you teach. I think it goes back to living that life and being that model of what that looks like to be a positive Christian today. And it's also about making sure that those teachable moments that you hear educators talk about, where the light bulb goes off, or it's a moment to make a point, a lot of our teachable moments revolve around our faith, and making sure that we don't miss those opportunities to show how that's intertwined in everything that we do.
How do you recognize those moments when a teachable moment comes, whether it's a faith moment or a life lesson moment or an academic subject? How do you as educators come to recognize that? Because as a parent, I find that's still something that I'm, striving to do better at.
I think you have to be open that God puts himself in your life in many different ways. And and if we keep our hearts open for that, then we see it. It could be in the way a child asks a question, the light in somebody's eyes that tells you they're right there with you, and you can see that anticipation in someone's face that they have something else to add or to say. And if we ignore those and don't take advantage, we miss the opportunity for conversation and for everyone to be involved and invested in our learning.
So what do you love about your job? I mean, you have had a smile on your face. It's late and a long day, and your work day started earlier than mine did. And it's Thursday, so you've been at it all week, and it's back to school time of year. So you have every reason in the world to be grumpy and droopy eyed, but you're not. So you clearly love your job. You have a passion for it. And I'm just curious as to what specific things you really love about what you do.
I'll tell you that the last couple of years have reminded me about some of the things that I really loved about my job because I miss them. I had a little fella come up to me about a year and a half ago, deep into us having to be spaced apart. And he just looked at me one afternoon and said, "I really wish I could hug you, Miss Ragusa." And you just don't think about it. I mean, it's just part of our way of loving our students and loving each other. And so I love the interaction with students. I still feel like I'm a teacher at heart. I know I've been doing this administration gig for a while now, but my husband will tell you I still have boxes in the attic that I can't get rid of because I can't think of myself as not being a teacher again at some point in my life. But so if I look at myself as a teacher as well, then I want to make sure that I have those opportunities. And so seeing students from pre-K 4, because if you ever want to feel good, you should go in a pre-K classroom because they are having fun all day long. So they're going to lift your spirits. They love to hug and they love to tell you everything they've been doing. And then to go from the pre-K 4 all the way up to 8th grade, it is such a huge age difference. But there's so much to learn from every age group that we have. Our middle school students are learning new things and learning how to be the social beings that they are and seeing what their possibilities are. And so sometimes it challenges me to be better or challenges me to think outside of the box. I think that's one of my favorite things is that because I couldn't tell you a typical day in the life of a principal, I have to think outside of the box all the time. And so it keeps my brain and my life very interesting because I don't always know what it's going to be like.
That sounds amazing. Our friend Mandy has brought up a question here. You mentioned the differences in ages from, say, the pre-K level to 8th grade. And she reminds me of the 8th grade buddy system where your 8th graders have a kindergarten buddy. I remember that well from my own SJS days, but I got the parental, glimpse of it this last year with my son Luke and his 8th grade buddy Ace, who he just idolized and admired as the sweetest kid in the world. Would you mind telling our viewers about that program and how it works? Because it's really one of the neatest things the school offers.
Sure, it definitely is. That was a wonderful tradition to come into and see how that worked. So our kindergartners are paired with an 8th grader, each kindergartner, and now actually some of our 8th graders have to have 2 buddies to make sure that everybody has a buddy. But they're paired at the beginning of the school year. They do activities together throughout the year. They recognize each other on their birthdays. They sit together when we go to mass. We have a Mardi Gras parade during parade season. Our kindergartners create
and it's a doozy. These floats are amazing. I mean, this was my first time this year, and I was just blown away. It's really amazing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to give out a shout to those floats. They really blew my mind.
It's a huge event. Their 8th grade buddies pull their floats. And I have to tell you, one of the coolest things that happened this year that will become a new tradition, I'm sure, is that our kindergartners, just like our pre-K students, stagger in the beginning in small groups. And so they don't join us, everybody together, until actually next Monday. So last week, our eighth graders in the afternoon, once the small group of students were gone, actually went into the kindergarten classrooms and prayed a rosary for their buddies before they even knew who they are. They
Oh,
don't even
that's
know who
cool.
their buddies are yet, but they went in to pray for them and their year as kindergartners. So that was a really cool new thing that our
Yeah,
students did this year.
that's really amazing. Well, yeah, I'm so glad to see you keeping that program up. It's a wonderful one. We're focusing, and you're such a positive person, and I know that it's your natural inclination to focus on the positive. But I do want to ask you, like any principal, I'm sure you have challenges. What are some challenges you face as a principal, and how do you react to those challenges to overcome them and solve the problems that you see day in day out? Because earlier you mentioned no 2 days are alike when you're running a school, and I cannot imagine how tough that is, but I'm sure you must have a great approach to how you solve problems. So would you mind discussing a few of the challenges and how you react to them?
Sure. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed moving into the Catholic school system and the difference from being in the public school system is that because we're a smaller setting, um, I wear a lot of hats. And that means we have an amazing head custodian. I'm sure you'll start getting lots of comments about Mr. Charles
Yeah,
now
Mr.
that I've
Charles, he
mentioned him.
waves every morning. No, he's amazing. I noticed him long before my kids got to school. Just living in that area, a few blocks from the school. Yeah, he's an amazing man.
Yes.
Yes.
So, I'm his partner on many days trying to
Hmm.
problem solve issues with facilities and then I have to make sure that the budget works every year. So there are more hats than you wear in a public school system because it really is uh, we function as our own school system within
Right.
the diocese. And so there are a
Yes.
lot of things that pull me away from the classrooms, and that's probably the most difficult part of the job is to manage well those things that can pull you away from being in the classroom. That's where I choose to be every day, and yet things pull me away from that sometimes. And so I have to try to manage my time really well to be sure that I remember my priorities.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I love that you gave Mr. Charles props because he's so neat. And you're right; they're chiming in already. Trisha Nicholas, hey Trisha, I've been begging you to come on the show for 2 years. One day I'm going to get you on here. She says that we love Mr. Charles. We love him at Strawberry Castle. My boys loved you at Strawberry Castle, Trisha. They love you everywhere you are. But that's such an important role. I think back to my own childhood. We had an incredible custodian, Mr. Orso, who was a beloved member of the St. Joseph community, great family. But I remember, I was a kind of a bookworm, kind of your model altar boy most of the time, not all the time, but I didn't get in a ton of trouble. But I'll tell some tales of my brother Bree. He did from time to time, and he would get assigned to go work and help Mr. Orso. And he was so great about it because I think earlier you talked about leading by example, and showing these kids your example and how you live and lead. And he did that. And I remember he knew exactly when to have a firm, hold on the situation. And then, there was those days he would sneak him a Coke and really, pick him back up. And I know Mr. Charles must be, serving that role for you so well. So that's really neat. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about the benefits of Catholic school as you see them, because I'm sure out there are parents out there that are weighing decisions, and it's a tough one, where to send your kid to school, whether to spring for it if you can afford to do it. What are the main selling points of educating your kids, not just at St. Joseph, but at any Catholic school?
Well, certainly having that faith based education, because it is embedded in all of our days, even in the conversations that I can have with students who are struggling, to be able to bring it back to that and about the choices that we make every day and being forgiven for poor choices that we make and always having an opportunity to start over. It just permeates the campus. And so in that regard, because it is allowed to permeate our campus, I believe we are able to give a very positive learning environment for our students. I will also say that, and I'm sure I sound like a broken record, but the family atmosphere at St. Joseph is phenomenal. And
Right.
it truly is a community of people who pull together when someone needs something, are always willing to lend a helping hand. They're the reason that our spring fair is so successful each year. And, you know, we also have the Strawberry Festival parking, that's our other fundraiser. And without our parents coming together and making school a priority in their life in general, not just for their children, but for them as a family, that is the key. And I believe that because although we're growing, we're not so big that we cannot still connect. And I think that's very important. I know it's very important to me. It's very important to Father McDuffie. We're not trying to see if we can become the biggest Catholic school there is, but rather just to maintain the atmosphere that we have. And I know that the Catholic schools in our area do the same thing. They are
Right.
looking to help to create a family so that everyone feels connected. That's what God calls us to do, is live in community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the way you described we're growing, but we're not growing so big that we can't stay connected. Because I think in a nutshell, that's basically Ponchatoula. I mean, this little town, you've been here, I think you said 25 years. I've been here 45 years. It looks very different than it did when I arrived as a little kid. But it's still got this small town cohesion to it. The community, the families, it's still so important. How do you feel like the days ahead look for the city of Ponchatoula, St. Joseph School, and its place in the community? I mean, do you have a firm vision for the future? And if so, what is it?
I think that we are a key part of this community. We are definitely rooted, and I know that we have the support of the community here, and in Ponchatoula we feel it every day. I know that I have a perspective of coming from a big city growing up, so every now and then I kind of catch myself saying, like, did that really happen? Like, did I go into Paul's this morning and I placed an order and nobody asked me what my name was before I got there? And then Mayor Zavia said hello as he walked out this morning, and just the small town piece of it and the feel
Right.
of people reaching out and making sure they're making the connections and knowing one another is present and is purposeful. You can just feel that people are working hard to not lose that piece of what makes Ponchatoula special. And I think because of that, we all continue to grow in the same direction of what's important.
Yeah. Well, look, I promised you I'd get you out of here on time. More importantly, I promised my wife I'd get back in time to help with those kiddos. So I'll only ask you a few more questions, but I have to ask you kind of the self-serving question that would benefit me and my family. And it's one about advice you have for parents. And I'm sure this would apply to parents, whether we're talking kids in the public school system, Champ Cooper, Ponchatoula Junior High, the DC Reeves, which you mentioned earlier. We've had some of their great teachers on the program before, or SJS. But parenting is hard. Most of us parents don't have a background in education. Some of us, like me, are going through this for the first time. And even when you're doing it for the fourth time, it's hard. I see that with my brothers. So what advice do you have as a principal for parents as we approach a new school year and really need to figure out how to do this the right way?
I think that a couple of pieces of advice I would give, and some of this is probably because of my age and and not just my time as an educator, but I would say that I remember hearing people say when we first went into COVID mode and people were at home with their families that they didn't realize how much they valued or missed having dinner together every night because you didn't have a choice. You were all together. And I was very surprised at how quickly we got back to the chaos of everyday life and running around and doing things and not being in that mode. I would recommend to families that your face-to-face time is key. As parents, if you can put down the devices and make them put down the devices so that you're really connecting with one another. I think that communication is a struggle for everyone today, and it's becoming harder and harder. So if we don't do it in our homes, then we're all going to suffer for not being able to know how to talk to one another and solve problems and be each other's biggest cheerleaders as well.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend that you find and you carve out that time to keep as your family time when you know that you're going to spend some time, ask those questions, do something crazy and fun together, whether it be game night or whatever it is that you guys like to do together.
Yeah.
But to hold that sacred and keep that time special, all the other things will happen, and they're not going to miss out on, you know, you don't have to play 6 different sports all the time. Sometimes it's about the simplicity of life that really helps to ground people.
That's great advice. And I can tell you, my boys love their sports, their activities, but they really love family movie night. We do it every Saturday night, and they just look forward to it. The popcorn, the picking the movie, and that's their thing. So that's wonderful advice, and I thank you for it. You have absolutely lived up to the hype. You know, you are an incredible woman, a great leader for this school, for this community. What else should we know about you before we go?
I'm a grandmother of 9 now.
No way. Wow.
So that's probably my favorite thing to brag about these days are my grandchildren.
I bet. Wait, 9 grandkids. Is this one of those tell us you're Catholic without telling us you're Catholic moments? I think you just
maybe. I didn't know my children were going to be that Catholic.
Wow, that's great. That's prolific. Well, you know, my parents have somewhere 12, 13. I've lost count of how many grandkids they have, but they tell me all the time that that's the best thing ever. And as much as I love parenthood, wait till the grandkids come. You're going to love it even more.
They are correct.
Well, look, for your final question, is there anything else you'd like to share with our community, our viewers, anything on your mind, on your heart, anything at all you think our viewers, you know, should hear?
I would just like to reiterate that I know what a blessing it is for me to be at St. Joseph, and I love that God put this in my path. And I'm so excited about the growth that's happening at St. Joseph, not just in the number of students, but in the changes that we're able to make to the campus. We've added a Spanish program this year, and just to watch our school evolve and become more and more of what our students need so that they can be that lifelong learner in whatever the world may be when they are old enough to have a job, really excites me that we are working hard to keep up.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can think of no better way to close the program than this comment that just came through from a woman that you mentioned earlier, Miss Shelley Ernst. She says, way to go, Danette. Great job. Yes, our SJS family is amazing. And of course, Miss Ernst, you are right. It is an amazing family. So thank you, Principal Ragusa, for sharing your time with us, for sharing your wisdom and energy and effort and attention and all you do with our kids and our community. And to you and to our viewers, I say goodbye, and we will see you next week here on Ponchatoula Live. Take care.